500 men. That's the number you were taught. 500 Spanish soldiers, led by one ambitious captain, who supposedly toppled an empire of millions. An empire with a capital larger than almost any city in Europe, with armies that could field tens of thousands of warriors in a single afternoon. And we're told it fell to a few hundred strangers with steel and horses. But that story is a lie. Not because the Spanish weren't there, but because they were never enough. An empire of millions is not brought down by a few hundred men. It never has been. It never will be. It is brought down from the inside. By the end of this video, you'll understand who really destroyed the Aztecs, and why the strangers who lit the match spent the next 500 years taking credit for the fire. It begins in the middle of a lake, around 1325. A wandering, unwanted people arrive in the Valley of Mexico. Everyone else has already claimed the good land, so they take the one place nobody wants, a swampy island in the center of Lake Texcoco, and on that mud, they build something impossible. They call it Tenochtitlan. They carve floating gardens out of the water. They raise causeways and aqueducts and temples that climb toward the sun. Within a century, it becomes one of the largest cities on Earth. Home, historians estimate, to somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 people. To put that in perspectives, that's larger than London's, larger than Rome's, larger than almost anything in Europe at the time. Its central market alone was a wonder. The Spanish who later saw it wrote that tens of thousands of people came to trade there in a single day. Gold and jade and cacao and cloth. A river of commerce flowing through streets of stone and water. Some of those soldiers had walked the great cities of Europe, and they admitted they had never seen anything like it. But a city is not an empire. In 1428, Tenochtitlan joins with two neighboring cities, Texcoco and Tlacopan, to form what we now call the Triple Alliance. Together, they begin to conquer, valley by valley, people by peoples. They build a web of tribute that stretches across the heart of what is now Mexico. And this is the part of the story that matters most, because the way they ruled is the reason they fell. The Aztecs did not govern the peoples they conquered. Not really. They did not build roads to unite them, or laws to bind them, or an identity to share. They demanded tribute, gold, cotton, feathers, food, warriors, and something far more terrible. The Aztec world was held together by human sacrifice. Their priests believed the sun itself would die, that the universe would simply stop, unless it was fed a constant supply of human blood. So the empire went hunting for it. They fought ritual wars, sometimes called flower wars, not to take land, but to take prisoners. Men to be marched up the temple steps and cut open at the top. How many died this way? Historians still argue over. Some accounts describe thousands in a single ceremony. Others say those numbers were exaggerated by the very people who later wanted to justify the conquest. But strip away the debate, and one hard fact remains. To the peoples living under Aztec rules, Tenochtitlan was not a glorious capital. It was the place your sons and daughters were taken, and never came back. Therefore, across the empire, a quiet, burning hatred was building. And nowhere did it burn hotter than in a stubborn little nation called Tlaxcala. Tlaxcala was surrounded, an island of independence in an Aztec sea. For generations, the Triple Alliance had squeezed them, raided them, used them as a hunting ground for sacrifice. The Tlaxcalans had never been conquered, but they had never been free of the fear either. They didn't need a foreign savior. They needed an opening. And in 1519, one walked out of the ocean. In the spring of 1519, a Spanish expedition lands on the coast, near what is now Veracruz. It is led by a minor nobleman, a gambler, a schemer, a man drowning in debt back home. His name is Hernán Cortés. He commands somewhere around 500 men. He has a handful of horses, a few cannon, and no permission. His own governor has tried to recall the expedition. Cortés ignores him. And then, to make sure no one can turn back, he destroys his own ships. Think about what that means. There is no retreat now. There is no going home. It It is conquer or die, but Cortés has something more powerful than steel. He has information. Almost immediately, he acquires a translators, an enslaved woman the Spanish called Doña Marina, known to history as La Malinche. She speaks the languages of this land. She understands its politics, its rivalries, its wounds, and through her, Cortés learns the single most important fact of the entire campaign, that this mighty empire is hated by almost everyone inside it. He does not see a nation. He sees a fractures and a lever. At first, the Tlaxcalans fight him. They hurl thousands of warriors at the Spanish, and they nearly win. Cortés loses men. His position is desperate, but the Tlaxcalan leaders see something the Aztecs never will. They see a weapon. Not 500 foreigners, but 500 foreigners who hate Tenochtitlan as much as they do. So they make a choice that will change the history of the world. They stop fighting Cortés and they join him. This is the moment the myth of the conquest quietly dies, because from here on, this is no longer a Spanish army. It is a Tlaxcalan army with Spanish officers. Alongside them march thousands of native warriors. Over the coming campaign, historians estimate the number of indigenous allies grew into the tens of thousands. Some accounts claim far higher. The 500 Spaniards are a rounding error. The real army is Mexican. Together, they march on Tenochtitlan. Along the way, in the city of Cholula, something horrifying happens. Cortés, warned of an ambush by La Malinche, strikes first, and thousands of unarmed Cholulans are slaughtered in a single day. It is a message, and the message travels. In November of 1519, the army finally sees it. Tenochtitlan, a shining city rising out of the water, temples gleaming, canals full of canoes, hundreds of thousands of people. Even the hardened Spanish soldiers later wrote that they wondered if they were dreaming. At the head of the Great Causeway waits the Emperor Moctezuma II. And here the story becomes strange, because Moctezuma does not attack. He does not close the gates, he invites them in. Historians have argued for centuries about why. Some say he was paralyzed by omens, others that he was trying to study his enemy, others that the tale of a hesitant, superstitious emperor was invented later to make him look weak. Whatever the reason, the most powerful man in the Americas let the wolves walk through his front door, and within days they seized him inside his own palace. The emperor of millions became a hostage in his own capital. For a while, it holds an uneasy, impossible balance. Cortés rules the empire through a captured king, but then it shatters. Cortés has to leave the city to fight off a rival Spanish force sent to arrest him. And while he is gone, the man he leaves in charge panics. During a sacred festival, the Spanish attack the Aztec nobility. Unarmed, dancing, celebrating, and massacre them in the temple courtyard. Now the city rises. The people of Tenochtitlan turn on the intruders in a fury. Moctezuma, brought out to calm them, is struck down. Whether by Spanish hands or by his own people's stones, we still don't know. The balance is gone, and on a rain-soaked night at the end of June 1520, the Spanish and their allies try to flee the city in the dark. The Aztecs are waiting. On the causeways over the water, in the black of night, it becomes a slaughter. Men drowned under the weight of the gold they tried to carry. Cannon lost in the lake. Hundreds of Spaniards killed, and far more of their native allies. The Spanish would remember it as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. By any military measure, Cortés had lost. He was broken, bleeding, driven out of the city with a fraction of his men. The conquest, as a conquest, was over. The Aztecs had won. And then, an invisible enemy finished what no army could, smallpox. It had crossed the ocean in Spanish bodies, and now it spread out of Veracruz, into a population that had never encountered it, and therefore had no defense against it at all. The Europeans had lived with this disease for centuries. Their bodies had learned to survive it. The people of Mexico had not. The result was apocalyptic. The sickness swept through Tenochtitlan while the city was still celebrating its victory. It killed the strong and the weak alike. It killed warriors in their prime. It killed the new emperor, Cuitlahuac, who had just driven the Spanish out. Historians estimate that in this first wave alone, smallpox may have killed something on the order of 40% of the population of central Mexico. Some estimates run even higher. Think about that before the final battle was ever fought. A huge share of the city's defenders, its leaders, its soldiers, its families, were already dead. Native accounts written down afterward describe it in a way you cannot forget. Homes where every single person fell sick at once, too weak to rise, too weak to fetch waters. Families dying together in the dark because no one was left standing to care for them. Not from Spanish swords, from a disease that arrived by accident. The Aztec Empire was not defeated in one great battle. It was hollowed out from the inside, by a sickness no one understood. By the spring of 1521, Cortés is ready to return, but look closely at the army he brings back. The Spanish are still only a few hundred. What has grown is everything around them. Tens of thousands of Tlaxcalan and other allied warriors surround the Spanish core. Some accounts of the final siege put the native army in the hundreds of thousands. The exact figure is disputed, but every serious historian agrees on the shape of it. This was overwhelmingly a native army, marching to destroy a native capital. Cortés has the Spanish build small warships and carries the pieces overland to launch them onto the lake. Then he does the cruelest thing of all. He cuts the aqueducts. He blockades the causeways. He starves the greatest city in the Americas. For roughly 90 days, the siege grinds on, street by street, canal by canal. The defenders, led by their last emperor, Cuauhtémoc, fight with a desperation that stuns even their enemies. But they are starving. They are sick, they are cut off, and they are being crushed by an army made up of their own neighbors, their own tribute peoples. Every nation the Aztecs had ever bled. On the 13th of August, 1521, Tenochtitlan falls. Cuauhtémoc is captured trying to escape across the water. The temples are pulled down. The canals are filled with rubble and the dead. One of the largest cities on Earth is gone. And on top of its ruins, the Spanish begin to build a new capital, Mexico City, the seat of an empire that will last 300 years. Now here is the part almost no one tells you. When the histories were written, they were written by the winners who could write. Cortés wrote letters to his king describing a handful of brave Spaniards conquering a savage empire against impossible odds. The Spanish crown loved that story. It made the conquest a Christian miracle. Proof that God was on their side. And in that story, the Tlaxcalans vanish. The tens of thousands of native warriors who did most of the fighting and most of the dying are reduced to a footnote. The smallpox that emptied the city before the siege barely gets a mention. The people who actually toppled the Aztec Empire were written out of their own victory. This is why the debate still burns among historians today. Because if you look at what really happened, it starts to look less like a conquest and more like a revolution. A rebellion of a dozen oppressed nations, rising up against the empire that had terrorized them for centuries, and using a few hundred foreign opportunists as the tip of the spear. And when it was over, the strangers simply stepped forward and claimed the whole thing as their own. So think about what actually killed the Aztec Empire. It was not the courage of 500 Spaniards. It was a century of cruelty coming home. It was every son taken for sacrifice, every nation ground down for tribute, every enemy the Aztecs made and never bothered to reconcile. It was a plague that arrived by accident. It was, above all, their own neighbors, choosing at last to burn it all down. The Aztecs were not beaten by a stronger people. They were beaten by their own. And history gave the credit to the strangers who simply lit the match. So what was this, really? A Spanish conquest, or a native rebellion that the Spanish hijacked and stole the credit for? Tell me down in the comments. conquerors, or opportunists who got lucky. I read everyone. And if you want more history where the version you were taught in school falls apart the moment you look closely, subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one.